Good morning. We're ready to begin our journey together today. First, let me say a quick thank you to everyone. And we will be prayerful that those who are on their way will, as people like to say, dance between the raindrops. And we'll be here as soon as possible. But we're going to go ahead and get started. As you can well see, we have a busy agenda for the day, and I don't want anything to come between us and fulfilling what we have as a mission for this time together. I want to introduce to you right now first the Reverend Terry Terrell. Reverend Terrell is the COO and project director, program director for our MICTAN initiative, and she will come now and we'll go forward as the program indicates.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. It is indeed a pleasure to be in Oakland this morning, or technically Irvingville. Correct? It's a joy. We are just really, really excited about this collaborative work that we're doing in conjunction with the Alameda Public Health Department, Office of AIDS. This is just fantastic. The acronym, you'll hear MICTAN a lot, which stands for Metropolitan Interdenominational Church Technical Assistance Network. So MICTAN is just a little bit cleaner to kind of speak and get out. We are just delighted to be able to have this pre-launch today for our faith leaders. We know that the voice of faith leaders definitely can galvanize, can definitely bring in that grassroots empowerment so that we can work towards the decline of the pandemic in the African American community. Before we move any further, we would like to have the Bishop Joseph Smith to please come forward and give our invocation.
Let us pray. Eternal Father, oh God, we come in the precious name of Jesus at this time, Lord. We thank you for what's about to undertake. And Lord, we need you right now, even as we speak. Lord, you can do the impossible. Man's extremity has always been your opportunity. And Lord, as we come together from the various churches and various communities, those that are involved, Lord, let us come together that we may be able to reach decisions and find out the direction that you would have us to go. For you said, whatever we bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, whatever we loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. But if 2 or 3 of us would come together, touching and agreeing, that you would be in the midst. We know that you can do all things and you do it well. And for this, Lord, those who are coming in on that dangerous highway, give them travel grace and arrival mercy. Keep them from harm and danger. We shall be so careful to give you the glory, the honor, and praise. And all in agreement said, amen.
Amen. Just a few housekeeping items. For those of you who have not yet registered, we would appreciate it so much if you would go to the registration table and please register. Drop in your business card. That would be great, and get a name tag. The name tag will help the staff, both the MICTAN staff, the Alameda County staff, and the hotel staff know that you are associated with this conference. In addition to that, if you are a presenter and you have not seen myself or Cynthia Long, Cynthia, wave your hand, she's in the back there. Please kind of see her before the session to help kind of facilitate ease to make sure that you have what you need for today. We have put in 2 breaks, one in the morning, one in the afternoon, but of course, please feel free to self-regulate. The restrooms are out that door and to the right, and it'll be like the first little alcove on your left. In addition, we all know that we are in the world of the age of technology. Please put your phones on silent or vibrate so that we won't be disturbing presenters during their time. And lastly, and Cynthia, please correct me if this has been updated, there's a discounted parking ticket for $5. So please go to the front desk before questions or any needs, please see Cynthia. She'll be accessible. Please see me if you can get to me up here, or depending on where I am at the time. And again, we are so delighted that you are with us this morning. At this time, we would like to call to the podium Kabir Hippolyte, and Kabir will give us the occasion and opening reflections. Kabir is the director of the Office of AIDS Administration of Oakland County, California. Kabir.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I am just very, very excited to be in this moment. I didn't know if we would have 60 or 70 or 10, but each of you that's actually here and is making this way, and those who are coming, deeply do love you. And just very, very pleased to see you all. Can you all hear me in the back?
No.
No? Okay. I get told that I have a soft voice, so I'm going to try to pump it up just a little bit. How about now? Can you hear me?
A little better.
Okay, a little bit. I was asked to actually share some reflections. I certainly want to welcome all of the ministers and speakers. I'm hoping my colleague, Dr. Rodai, will actually be able to be here today. She had an emergency left yesterday evening, so I have her epidemiologist presentation. I have to put in a disclaimer. Disclaimer number one, I'm not an epidemiologist, I'm a lawyer. But I have seen some of the numbers. Of course, we work together all the time, so I will try to get through those. Hopefully Dr. Hyman, maybe Dr. Hyman can actually interpret some of the slides as we get started. I'll enlist you in the service. In any event, that will come later on in the program, so we will see if she can join us. So, the talk that I wanted to just give you briefly, 15 minutes, someone will keep me on track. This is entitled Surfing the Sea of Ambiguity, a phrase that I sort of coined years and years ago, and I think it's become plain as I share with you just some personal reflections that Reverend Saunders asked me to do. So in January of 2012, Reverend Saunders introduced himself to me while I was at the 2013 National African American MSM Leadership Conference in New Orleans. Reverend Saunders, as you know, is the senior servant of the Metropolitan Interdenominational Church in Nashville, Tennessee, and I had not met him before. He asked me, though, if I would be interested in collaborating with him to host an African American Ministers Conference in Alameda County. And of course, I jumped at the opportunity, and we have worked closely all year long to bring this conference here to reality today. So I want to thank you again. So I wanted to start by just sharing some reflections over, I guess, my life, about what has brought me here. And I thought I would tell you a little bit of my story in the hope that you might find some of it helpful and instructive. So I want to begin by saying that in 1978, I almost drowned on senior pet day. I was 18. My entire high school, my senior class, had defected to Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk. I mean, I'm just kind of rushing to get my son in school and get there. I'll get it together. So we were all down at Santa Cruz Beach on the boardwalk, and this was my first time at the Pacific Ocean. And naively, I had decided to try body surfing after spending the morning learning how to skimboard, and play on the beach volleyball, and frisbee, and football. Have you ever done any of those activities on the beach? Running and moving in sand takes a lot of energy out of you. It was a bright, hot, sunny day. I was 18, wasn't thinking about all that. So what I also didn't realize is that, and I'm going to give you just a picture of Santa Cruz Beach. If you all have ever been there, it's kind of like this crescent shape. And there's a big sandbar that kind of extends way, way, way out to the ocean. So you can actually walk out way, way out there. The water is really essentially up to your waist. So all my classmates were out there body surfing. They knew, I think most of them knew what they were doing. And what I didn't realize is that the waves come in sort of from the north to the south, and they press from the west to the east. So the sandbar drops off. So keep that in mind as I go through this. So So the waves, catching them, I was learning how to do this thing. The waves were pushing me closer and closer to the edge of the sandbar, which I did not recognize. And the drop off, of course, was again precipitous. When I took the last wave, I was swept over the edge and discovered that there was no bottom. The sandbar was gone. Suddenly, the waves became more powerful, and they thundered down on my head like waves, dragging me under. And so surprised, I fought my way to the water surface. There was one classmate, a gentleman named Mike Cubanthal, who I'll never forget. He noticed me. He shouted, "Do you need some help?" But at that point, I was so physically exhausted after the earlier sports activities and what have you that I couldn't actually get enough breath to shout, and I couldn't lift my arms out of the water. So, receiving no response from me, Mike swam back to the rest of my class, leaving me alone. I was a little annoyed. So I looked behind me, and that was the first time I realized just how far out. Because remember, that beach is like a crescent, so when you start out here, by the time you get down here, you're much further away. So everybody on the beach looked like little ants, and the waves were just crashing down. It was at that moment that I realized that I could drown. I'm not a very strong swimmer, but I do know how to swim, honestly. So for a moment I thought I could panic, but I thought to myself, if you panic, you will die. So I had a split second to decide that I wanted to live. And then the next wave hit me. And it was nearly impossible to describe the kind of feelings of uncertainty and struggling to regain the surface, feeling like there was no more fight left in me. I tried every swimming stroke that I could muster to reach the edge of the shore. And I wasn't sure if I was going to survive. I was pounded by waves and swept under by the currents. The experience seemed interminable and terrible. And then as I drifted closer to the shore, the waves dragged me out across the bottom of the ocean. And I was scraped and bruised by rocks just rolling around by this current. Rocks and shells and sand, and Lord only knows what was down there. So then suddenly, I was in the surf, and the whole thing was over. Nobody knew what I had just experienced so intensely. And I kind of lay on the sand for just a moment, feeling utterly by myself, even though I was in the midst of all my friends. It's kind of like being HIV positive sometimes. But a few years later, I would remember that feeling of what I now call surfing the sea at UAE. So I want to fast forward to 1982. I was now 22. And after college years full of some thoughts about suicide by being gay, I had finally accepted my own sexuality and decided to drive to the famous, or infamous, San Francisco Castro, gay Mecca. And having just arrived, I stood on the corner of 18th and Castro. It was a copy of a community newspaper called Coming Up, which some of you might remember. It caught my eye. And I flipped through it only to find a story about 12 gay men who had died of a strange new disease in New York City called GRID, or gay-related immunodeficiency. My immediate thought was, how am I going to survive this? And it was almost as if somebody had heard my thoughts. There was a voice, it sounded like somebody was standing right next to me, and said, "You won't." I was so startled that I looked around to see if somebody actually was standing next to me, and there was nobody there. So I was a little rattled. I put the community newspaper back in the rack, and I immediately let the cat go. So I'm going to fast forward a little bit more to 1983. And this is very short. I fell in love in Los Angeles. It was a very brief but very intense romance. And that's the story for another day. Suffice to say that, unfortunately, my father died of AIDS years later. So fast forward with me once again to 1989. Can you all still hear me in the back? Can you still hear me? A little bit more? Okay. Fast forward to 1989. I am now an associate litigator in a big law firm. I'm feeling like Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man. If you've ever read that book, you know what I'm talking about. I never lost a case, but the firm's partners looked right through me when we passed in the hallway. That is until one day when a senior business partner called into his office with a special assignment. I have to explain if you're a litigator, you don't do business law. In business law, you don't do litigation. So I'm wondering, why is a senior business partner calling into his office? He said he wanted to impress an African-American client that he was trying to import business from. And he said, quote, "I just need someone who looks like you." I decided it was time to go. But about that time, I also felt like it was time for me to get tested for HIV. I never received testing before. So I gave notice before the test because I didn't want my test results to shape my decision about leaving the firm. I knew I had made the right decision to leave. My results came back positive, and the doctors told me to arrange my affairs. They said there'll be good days and there'll be bad days. And then sort of dismissively sent me off to see the nurse. And after muttering a few choice words that I will repeat here, I went to see the nurse. And for a moment, I contemplated retracting my resignation from my firm. After all, I had no job at that point, no benefits, and no support. But I knew I made the healthy choice. So when I saw the nurse, she told me two things that I have always shared with my friends and clients ever since. And I'll share them with you now. She said two things. First of all, she said, don't die of the diagnosis. Secondly, she said, do your own research. And I thought, great. I just figured out how to get through law school. I'm the first one to go to any graduate school in my family. And that was a big enough chore. And now I have to become a microbiologist. So I went home and I sat for about 3 months, unemployed, just kind of fooling my jets, taking it all in. And every time I started to relax, a thought would kind of creep in and said, you know what? You can't be enjoying yourself. You're supposed to be dying. And after all, this is again 1989, 1990. AIDS was supposed to be, and was for many of us, about suffering and death. But then another spirit kicked in. I said, wait a minute, I thought. There have always been epidemics since the dawn of time. And there have always been survivors. And we call them statistical fluke because we can't explain sometimes how they survive. So I realized my job was to become a statistical fluke. I was ready to serve the seed ambiguity again. So fast forward again to 1990, I took a job as the client services director for the AIDS legal referral panel in San Francisco. First job I saw in a newspaper, and I thought, I can do that. Within a few weeks, I met my first long-term survivor. He was a white gay man from Texas. His name was Douglas. He taught me a great deal, but at first he didn't want to tell me anything. We had to basically talk about some of his legal questions and then ask a few demographic questions such as, when were you first diagnosed with HIV or AIDS? And when he told me, he was already past his AIDS diagnosis by 6 years. This is 1990. So I asked him how he thought he had managed to survive. Here's my first statistical fluke on the phone. I want to know. He said, I don't want to talk about that. I have to live in his Texas accent. I don't want to talk about that. He said, I've talked to health departments, to the CDC, the NIH, and Congress. Hell, I've sent White House letters. Nobody wants to hear what I have to say. So I paused for a moment and I said, with all due respect, I'm listening, and I would like to hear what you have to say. So he let me in. The first thing he said was, AIDS was sent here to heal the planet. And I was shocked. So it seemed like such an appalling thing to say when so many people were suffering and dying. But he went on, and I realized what he meant. He said, in order to survive AIDS, to live with AIDS and HIV, you have to re-examine every fundamental assumption by which you live your life. That's a tall order. But that's what it takes to become a statistical fluke. That's what you do when you serve the seed ambiguity. So I went on to counsel thousands of clients over the next 6 years as the client services director of the AIDS panel. And I have become a statistical fluke. And of course, that's become much easier now with the advent of protease inhibitors and all the medications that we have. So the spirit inside my heart has always told me never to buy into conventional wisdom. Never. Because there's always a higher power, and I know that all of you will understand and appreciate that. The Bible commands us, above all other things, get the understanding. That's one of my favorite quotes. So I'm here today to ask you to help me to breathe that spirit into all of our African American brothers and sisters and all those who are living with HIV AIDS, HIV positive or HIV negative. And as God's servants, I'm asking you to help me as a public servant to help those who will fight HIV AIDS, even though they may be under assault by poverty and discrimination, sexism, racism, homophobia, substance abuse, gun violence, incarceration, materialism, and so many other social determinants that we at the Public Health Department struggle with every day. So let me close by saying just a couple things. Once I had a dream in which I met God. For just a brief moment, we were face to face. I know that as ministers you will appreciate how the certainty of such moments is so intensely personal, they're difficult to share. But in my face-to-face encounter, we were laughing, God and I. And he spoke to me as a gay man. He said, I'm so very glad that you have finally realized that you have not been boxing with me. No one, no priest, no minister, no pastor, no bishop, no pope, has the power or the permission to separate us from God. But perhaps the greatest spiritual gift that I think that ministers can give to African American LGBT through the questioning folks is to remind them of that, because we so often do something very different. So I want to extend my thanks to Reverend Saunders for approaching me in January, and to Bishop Yvette Plunder, who is joining us. Is she here? She'll be here soon. Oh, she's flying in there. For working with me and the Office of AIDS Administration and our staff and our volunteers to bring about this very, very important day here in Mountain County. I welcome each of our guests, Reverend Terry Terrell. I don't see David Howell, but I think he's on the list. Dr. Muthia Mordai, Adrian McCall, Dean James Hildreth, Reverend Ron Sadler, Reverend Dr. James Forbes, and all of you who have assembled here to share, to listen, and to heal. May God bless you and keep you on your surfboards as you journey across the sea and the unity together. Thank you.
Amen.
That is so powerful. Thank you so much. Let me take a moment before I go any further in trying to outline and share with you what we hope will be the beginning of an experience for all of us together that will extend all the way through the spring of next year. We're focused on this day, though, today. And it's important for me to make sure you know at least one or two other people who are here in this room that are really the integral part of helping to make this happen. I guess almost 6 years ago now, we were able to marry, to bring together two initiatives that were both being funded by HHS. Adrian Call will be here, who just walked in. Hello, Adrian. You'll hear from her in a few moments. There's the HHS representative here today. So you'll be introduced again, but I want to make sure that you appreciate that Adrian and represents the entire entity, the whole office. And CDC has been a very important partner to us. We discovered 6 years ago that there was common ground between the work that we were doing with the capacity building, for the Centers for Disease Control, And the new initiative that was a part of the Vaccine Trial Network that is based at the Fred Hutchinson Research Center, Cancer Research Center in Seattle, Washington. And there are two people here today who are part of that network who have seen the value in what we were doing under the umbrella of the CDC and appreciating how we could collaborate together to do something. I want to introduce to you one person, well, two, you might know both of them. First, I'm going to ask Susan Buckeye, if she'll come and just say a word of welcome on behalf of the Vaccine Trial Network.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. And we're so excited to have you all here. We have been so valued this partnership with Reverend Sanders, who's worked with us tirelessly over many years now to try to help promote HIV vaccines and partnerships between communities that desperately need new prevention strategies. The only way we've ever eliminated infectious diseases in the world has been through vaccines in the context of other kinds of prevention strategies. And we're working to try to find a vaccine to prevent new infections, but we need to work with communities. It's really a community-based effort to try to find prevention strategies to prevent new infections and to cure infections that have already occurred. So we truly appreciate this community partnership. It really is central to our mission to try to find ways to prevent new infections throughout communities most severely impacted. And this is a global network, but here in the United States, we're particularly looking at working with African American communities who are most heavily impacted by the HIV/AIDS epidemic. So we're really delighted to have you here today and to join in partnership with you. And we look forward to opportunities to talk with you and work with you. Thank you so much.
That same umbrella with the HIV Vaccine Trial Network, Steve Wakefield is one of the people that helped give birth to the idea of what we now call the Legacy Project. And he's here with us here today also. If you just stand and if you want to say a word of welcome, we appreciate it.
He knows I don't walk far very easily. So actually I'm going to step back a little bit so I can see all your faces. I don't want to say a word of welcome as much as I want to say a word of gratitude. I walked out of my hotel room this morning and the person responsible for the quality of my life in that hotel room said, "How are you?" And I said, "I'm blessed and highly favored." And she said, "Blessed in what?" And what I knew that she didn't know that was going on deep inside of me was that this morning I would be in the presence of people who cared about healing lives. We just heard a pretty powerful, an extremely powerful talk.
Yeah.
You know, I actually want to go in another room and meditate for a minute.
Some of that.
You know, and express my gratitude that I've had those life experiences. And what I know is you've come in this room because you've had life experiences that you want to take deeper and encourage people. We hope today we learn a little bit more about the science. But I also totally favor to get to work with scientists like Dr. Buckbinder, who look at the whole person. You know, some scientists just look in the test tube. Some just, you know, look through the blood samples and what they see on a chart. But you know, in HIV vaccine research, we get to look at the whole person, and we want to end this epidemic. And we can't do that unless we're connected to people who know what it's like to be blessed and highly favored. Thanks for letting me be here.
All right. If you look at the bottom of the backside of your agenda for today, there are 4 logos there, and now you have met people who represent all of those. Reverend Terrell, who is a part of our effort at Metropolitan Denominational Church, the Centers for Disease Control, Adrian will be coming up a little bit later, the Alameda County Health Department, and the HIV Vaccine Trial Network, the Legacy Initiative. Those are the primary persons who are involved in this initiative today. And I say thank you again to all who have lent their time, talent, and treasure to this. It's really interesting, and I'll say this much, and Adrian, since you represent all of HHS, I tell people all the time, I think if we had tried to figure out how to do this formally, we'd still be trying. You do not get a lot of work that goes on between the agencies. You don't find HHS, you don't find CDC and SAMHSA and NIH and all the array of working together easily. So we just decided to do it. And we figured if it works, all is well. We know it's going to work because the spirit is on it, it's happening. And if anybody questions it, we figure it's easier to ask for forgiveness. That was amen. So I think that it'll be evident before the day is over that this is transpired. Let me tell you just a few things, and I'm going to race to keep us right on schedule for today. So Metropolitan Interdenominational Church. I always like to think about what we do in terms of doing ministry, prophetic ministry in the 21st century. And what that means for us is that it means trying to understand how the prophetic voice needs to be brought to bear in relationship to this issue of fighting HIV/AIDS. This is our brand, this is our logo, it's on everything that we do, it's in front of you, I pray for you to carry it with you. If you look closely, you'll see that embedded in the beautiful artistic work that was done by Reverend David Cassidy many years ago, one of our associates, is simply the word whosoever. And even though there's much in here that's symbolic of the faith tradition which we use as the basis, primary basis of that which we do in Metropolitan Church, we do see ourselves as being a congregation that's radically inclusive. We talk about ourselves as being a congregation that's inclusive of all, alienating to none, leading the way to spiritual growth by sharing God's love with the world. That's it. We think that's big enough to include everyone. We don't get bogged down in the ways in which people have come to experience deity in their lives, the ways in which they've come to know higher power, the ways in which they've come to know God. We don't even get too bogged down about the names that you use. We tend to lean toward Jesus, but if for you it is Buddha, if it is Allah, and if it is Elohim, if it is Jehovah, you go down the list. I think there's a way in which what we see in this word, whosoever, is truly that, whosoever. I always remember the great words that I heard once from Gardner C. Taylor, who said that ever since the Declaration of Independence was written, and it said that all men and women were created equal, that there's been somebody trying to file exception, except Native American, except, I feel that way about this word, whosoever. There are clearly people who are always trying to file exception, but there are no exceptions, that all are included, and we work very hard at trying to figure out how to make sure everything is done. But beyond that, you might say, how do you get beyond that? I'll tell you what I think is beyond that for us here today, and for the work that we'll be doing together, hopefully for the next few months. I think that the posture in the picture is more important than anything for us. Because indeed, I know that when you see that image of outstretched hands, those who are within the position instantly think of crucifixion and resurrection and all that represents. But I want to suggest to you there's something that I'm convinced this person, this individual who we focus on and refer to in the name of Jesus, was pushing all of us to do something that we too often do not do, and that is to stretch. Yes. And what we're going to be doing together for the next few months is some stretching. Because very often what happens is that we have become so limited, and we have ways in which we talk about what that means to stretch. But the one theme that I would suggest to you, that I know we will come up against over and over again, is this stumbling block that in too many instances has happened within our faith traditions. And that is that we've become so bogged down in telling people what to think about the issues and about the various realities that we encounter in life. And what we're going to be spending some time doing in these next months together is to deal with perhaps how to think beyond the limitations that we too often find ourselves placing upon ourselves. Sometimes they're doctrinal limitations, sometimes they're theological limitations, sometimes they're philosophical limitations, sometimes they're social standard ideas, the ways of knowing that are too limiting. In order to fulfill that vision that your friend who you met on that street corner, who talked to you about how HIV/AIDS can really be a part of, I always say, the thing that could be the transforming, saving experience of our time, is understanding that. But you have to stretch. Because you come to those places where you hit the wall because of something that you've been told and that you've become so dogmatically committed to that you cannot open your mind to see beyond that. Think of where we would be today if people stayed stuck in places of understanding and belief that existed in the past. There were those who didn't believe that this day could ever come. There are those who could believe. Anybody ought to be shouting about that today. They ought to be shouting about it as of the events of 9 days ago. People who just did not believe. And some of us still find it hard to believe. Some of us still find it hard to believe. So there's a way in which this business of understanding, as we need to bring it to bear in relationship to HIV/AIDS, is going to continue to require us that we stretch. So you will often see that when I'm doing presentations, even when I am talking about whatever the slide might be before you, I always keep that image at the top. Because I do believe in my heart that there's something that represents the energy, there's something that represents the power, there's something that represents that indescribable thing that goes beyond reason and logic that is captured in that word whosoever, that influences everything I have to say. Because ultimately that's what we're trying to do, is understand how we do this. You have before you, which really we decided to use as your really as your packet for today, the outline of the program that we have come to share with you. Let me just start off by telling you that we've learned, we've been doing this now for 12 years. When we first started doing capacity building work, we did it in a way that is probably what's most familiar to you, and that is that very often the way in which we did capacity building early on was that we went around the country. We actually have done this work in 23 states in the United States. But we actually went around doing these one-day events, a summit, a conference. You know the names. You've had them here. You've experienced them in other places. You know how we go in and we are involved in information dissemination. We're involved in training and development in a way that allows people to perhaps begin to become excited or even be energized, encouraged in terms of doing the work that we do. What we discovered about 5 years ago was that that was all well and good, and we don't in any way dismiss the significance of the work that we did in that format. But we realized that the issue of sustainability was one that we were not achieving to the degree that we would desire. It's not to say that it did not translate in some instances into having that kind of impact that left a sustainable mark on the work we've done. But we had to be more intentional about making it happen. So we convinced the Centers for Disease Control to allow us to begin to use this model where we go into communities and stay for at least 6 months, 5 months of the program, and then months beyond that. We've discovered how important it is to go into a city. I actually have been coming back and forth to Oakland now for the last 5 or 6 months. I know my way around Oakland now. When I picked up Dr. Forbes at midnight last night and there was an accident on the interstate, I got off and drove through the city. Now, I've been in Oakland enough, but I know my way around Oakland quite well. But we've discovered, and I've come to know most of your faces in this room, because we've discovered that the work doesn't happen as it needs to happen if indeed you don't go into a city and really be intentional about understanding what's going on, not to come with any predisposition with regard to how things are being done, but rather go and discover and see for yourself. I should tell you right now, I'm excited about what I see going on in Oakland because there are numerous efforts, and I should include the West Bay as well, because some of you are from the West Bay, and I think there's been evidence of clear collaboration. But what we also have seen, and I think you understand this, is that if we could somehow weave together, if we could somehow create the mosaic where all of these energies were singularly focused, where there was a greater level of collaboration, we probably could have a greater level of impact in terms of our fight against this disease. And I think there's also the appreciation that every organization I've talked to, every community-based organization, every service organization that I have had interactions with, every one of you talk about having a faith initiative, having some point in which you have determined that working with the faith community was an integral part of success in doing that which you were trying to achieve. And what we realized in that is at the same time everyone said that, it's kind of like the way church works anyhow. You know, you've got your preacher over here in your church, and you've got your preacher in your church over here that you work with, but there's a way in which we need to bring all those energies together. And I hope what will happen in these next months that we're together is that we'll figure out how to bring those energies together in a way that will allow the impact to be greater. The other thing that is important to us in this process is making sure that, and by the way, as you take time and read through this brochure, everything I'm saying to you is pretty much captured there. So I'm not doing the slides right now in that regard. But what you will appreciate is that the way this has been designed is to make sure that we bring insight, that we bring perspective, that we bring new ways of thinking to the table. So that as we interact with the faith community, and as we ourselves, who might not be clergy, you know, not necessarily people who wear their collars backwards and, you know, stand in pulpits on Sundays and other days of worship and proclaim what we believe to be the truth with regard to the great and complex and wondrous issues of the world and the times in which we live. Irrespective of that, we're clear that all of us are a part of this experience that we call a faith walk. Because all of us are spiritual beings. I tell people all the time, we are at least three-dimensional beings. We're physical, we're mental, and we're spiritual. And your spirituality does not have to be reflected in religious terms for you to be spiritual. Most of us do end up acting out, living out who we are as spiritual beings within some religious context. But all of us believe. And one of the things that has become problematic in our communities is that far too often dysfunctional belief systems have upstaged that which is liberating, transforming, and hope-driven. And consequently, instead of uplifting, can very often be restricting, restraining, and limiting. Right. So we're talking about how we become the forces of liberation in a fashion that go beyond the ordinary. Yeah. And I think you have to have that if you're going to deal with this issue of HIV/AIDS effectively. Now I'm going to take my last 5 minutes and introduce you to a concept. And I should tell you, this concept is one that it's not one that is the byproduct of our work. It's not exclusive. Some of you that have done work in the social sciences, the psychosocial arena, are familiar with this idea of communication for social change. It's a model that was developed a number of years ago as a direct byproduct of an effort that was, I guess, guided by the academic community at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, Maryland. If you saw the video earlier, you noticed the woman who was really who led that presidency. It was not very easy for you to hear, but you saw the face of a woman who has made her transition and gone on to glory now, Jackie Fleming Hampton. And Jackie Fleming Hampton is the person who first introduced, she had the job that Terry now has at MICTAN. And she's the woman who first introduced this particular concept. We then probably wove into it some things that we thought were unique and peculiar to what our understandings had come to be with regard to how you bring the faith community into the arena of involvement around responding to HIV/AIDS. But there are a couple of words, and then I'm going to get to the end of this. One word that you're going to hear us use an awful lot is the word conversation. I am just thrilled by the fact that the people at CDC, the people at the HIV Vaccine Trial Network, and especially the work that goes under the umbrella of Legacy, have been willing to buy in with us to this idea that there has to be a new conversation that transpires at a level beyond which we've ever gone before, if we're ever going to bring together the energies of those who are in the different arenas that are associated with agencies, programs, and initiatives that are designed to address HIV/AIDS. We are very clear that we don't see ourselves as valuing any one greater than the other, but appreciating that all of them are very much dependent upon there being a level of trust, there being a degree of rapport, that there is somehow the establishment and development of relationships that allow people to communicate on a level that gets us beyond the superficiality, that gets us beyond the stuff that too easily fragments and divides, to get beyond the things that for too long have allowed us to think that we cannot talk in a fashion that is mutually beneficial. The conversation is what we're about creating. And like I said, I'll be forever indebted to CDC for buying into the idea that these conversations need to happen. And you're a part of helping to make these conversations happen across the country. If you look also at the back of that brochure that you have, you will see where we've been trying to facilitate these conversations in cities across the country. The one that by far we look at as being probably the most successful for us right now is the experience that we've had in Rochester, New York. But that's not to say that the experiences in Houston and the experience in Chicago and South Carolina and Memphis have not also been very important. But we think that Oakland is going to be over the top. And it has a lot to do with what Kabir said to you earlier about this collaboration that we decided in the hallway of the Marriott Hotel in New Orleans, Louisiana, last January. And you know, y'all, when things happen and you know it's right, I have been looking for him. They told me what he looked like, and I actually we were both taking advantage of skirting out of a back door to find our way probably to the facility and ran right smack into each other. And we started talking about this. But what I would suggest to you has happened since then is that what we see in Oakland, and what you're doing today, by the way, we've learned as we've gone along. I mean, believe me, Memphis was not like Rochester, Rochester was not like. So we know how important it is that you are involved in this process. And what the Alameda County Health Department has brought to the table that is so important was, Kabir said, look, we've got a few dollars that we can contribute to this. We have never done a pre-launch. What we've done in the other cities is we've gone in and done due diligence and done our work to learn the community. And then we would have probably ended up inviting most of you to be a part of a leadership team. And that leadership team has meetings on a weekly basis. We do it by simply conference call to talk about how we orchestrate and work our way through this series that we're going to suggest and ask you to be a part of beginning in January. Because of this pre-conference, this pre-launch, what this means is we now have a chance to come together before we begin to have those conversations via the conference calls. And one of the goals today, just you know, there's nothing up our sleeve. Before you leave here today, we're going to ask you to buy in. You know, you've already seen there's a little card in here, all right? A little commitment card. And we're going to ask you to buy into the process. You see why it's important as I share with you just 2 or 3 things that's in this presentation. It is about transformation. It's more than information dissemination, okay? It's more than it's about transformation. The history of this is rooted in the guiding philosophy of communication for social change. It's really traced back to the work of Prophet Farah. You all know that work to some degree. Most of you all know, yes. Most of you all know the book, The Pedagogy of the Oppressed. Yes. And there's a way in which he speaks to these things of having to deal with how it is in relationship to purpose and cultural identity, building trust, commitment, and ownership. A part of doing it this way is that we want you to be involved in this evolution in a way that allows you to walk away having some ownership in it. The history, and these are 2 of the quotes I love from his work. It says transformation is only valid if it is carried out with people and not for them. Yeah. And it's a matter of getting you to be involved with us in doing this. And then liberation is like childbirth and a painful one. The person who emerges is a new person, and no longer oppressor or oppressed, but a person in the process of achieving freedom. It is only the oppressed who, by freeing themselves, can free their oppressors. We're talking about the thing that Kabir was hitting on earlier. We believe that the whole experience together can be transformative in terms of how we do things. When a village or group uses the communication for social change process to address the critical issue, they have already affected positive outcomes. Just coming together begins the process of affecting positive outcomes. And then the communication for social change process is as important as the outcome. The fact that we go through this together, that we come to know each other, that we come to have the bonded relationships and the kind of appreciation for each other ends up being perhaps as important as anything that we'll do. And then also the Communication for Social Change model focuses on the process by which dialogue as a participatory form of communication is related to collective action. I don't want you to come to this table, and we're going to be at this table together for a few months, and become impatient. Right? This happens all the time. I guarantee you, you've seen it. You didn't get my full bio, but if you read my full bio, there's a line that I took out of it for this purpose, and that is that in 1992, I ran for governor of the state of Tennessee. We came in third out of a field of 14. But running for governor was a byproduct of impatience. We had a clergy group that had worked very hard on developing a model by which we were working. It was called, It's About Our Health. It was a model that was determined to impact health. But impatience made somebody say one day at a meeting that I was not attending, and tell you about not showing up at a meeting, that I should be the candidate for governor for the state of Tennessee. But we were impatient because we kept saying, we got to do something, we got to do something, we got to do something. Sometimes we rush to the point of saying we got to do something without really understanding how we can do it together. But this means that, it does end up in collective action. And I should tell you that as we go through this, we will share with you this whole model of communication for social change. When you see the diagram of the dynamic of the work, it is almost mind-boggling. But let me just tell you this much about it right now so you will appreciate it. And then when you see it, you won't be overwhelmed by it. The Communication for Social Change model was developed by some people who realized that there was change happening in communities like that which most of us represent that were being disproportionately impacted by all kinds of negative forces. But they realized that change was happening. So I'm telling you, where we are right now today is a result of systematic change that's happened over time. What they did was, they said, there's something going on here, but no one has seemingly taken time to understand how it is that this continues to systematically happen. Whether it be tearing down the walls of desegregation in public schools, whether it be people who now are raising questions about mass incarceration and the adverse impact it's having upon us, as well as the ways in which it is also a contributing factor to infectious disease, particularly HIV and AIDS. You understand what I'm talking about? They realize that change is happening in these communities, but no one could sit back and say it's happening like this, right? So I want to say, what they did is they went into the city of Baltimore. They took anthropologists, who are basically ethnographers, and just sat down and said, let's just observe what these people are doing and see if we can then model that in a way that says, if you do it this way. And it has all kinds of ways of compensating for the stuff that we run into, all the way down to the breakdown in interpersonal relations, the kinds of petty jealousies, territorialism, and all this. I can be for real, right? Yeah. You all know why it doesn't happen, right? We become very territorial about how we deal with our issues. It becomes divisive because of all of those things that have been so deeply embedded in our consciousness that undermines our ability sometimes to realize the full potential that's locked up within us. We're talking about how you release that potential. And people see it happening, but we're talking about how maybe in a conversation get the way we do it more effectively. And then the next slide is that sustainability of social change is more likely if the individuals and communities most affected own the process and content of communication. So what we're saying is that we're trying to start this today, where as we go forward, you'll own it. It's not just about something that some folks from Nashville, Tennessee brought up to the Bay Area and said, here, do this. But rather, we hope that the conversation will unfold such that there will be a level of ownership, because the model is built around sustainability. I made the mistake in Rochester, and I'll never do it again, of when we left Rochester. I actually went to Rochester every month for 2 years. As much as I like Oakland, I really don't plan to come here every month. Because there's a way in which you're owning it means that it goes on without me or any other individual being necessarily present for it to happen. So we want to make sure we shape that, all right? And I haven't counted slides of that. Okay, communications should be empowering horizontally, over against, a lot of times it's the hierarchical, up-down thing, so empower horizontally. Give a voice, go back one, I'm sorry, give a voice to the previously unheard members of the community. There's so many people in our communities who are being adversely affected by this disease who have no voice. And I'm gonna call his name and he's gonna walk in the door. But y'all know y'all got one person in this community who is dogmatic about the fact of people who are being most disproportionately affected not having a voice. And he takes liberty all the time. His daughter says, you tell him I said he takes liberty of disrupting every meeting he goes to and saying, the right people are not here. All right? And we want to make sure the right people are here in the conversation. I mean, so, y'all heard it. Y'all enjoy hearing that from me better than you enjoy hearing it from Roosevelt, I know. But you know what I'm saying? I mean, that's legitimate. Yeah. It's legitimate.
And here he comes.
Good. But if I ever heard anybody say this over and over again, give a voice to the previously unheard. We're talking about MSM at some point, MSM has to be heard. We're talking about women who are disenfranchised, oppressed, and abused, then those voices have to be heard.
That's right.
It's not enough for those of us who stand in the pulpits to be saved. It gets to be important for them to be involved in the conversation, in the community, and the unheard members of the community, and be biased toward local content and ownership. So we are biased towards local content and ownership. Communities should be the agents of their own change.
That's right.
And what we're trying to do is create the conversation. We're just trying to create the conversation to allow this to happen. That's what we're here for. That's what I pray you'll appreciate. You're going to hear some voices today that I think will give you a glimpse of some of the distinguished lecturers and distinguished preachers. I did not know that Kabir was going to end up being one of those distinguished preachers this morning. Yeah. But, it's saying, give him the pulpit, give him the microphone. I got a friend who always said, don't relinquish the microphone. Be sure who you give the microphone to, right? I'm coming to where I trust Kabir enough. I knew I could give him the microphone, but I didn't know he was going to preach. But he took the text. He took the text. That's right. I know there's some biblical story that fits that moment in the water. And by the time I hear it next time, I will say, you know how it works by Kabir. The first time I say I got it from Kabir. The second time I say, I got it from somebody I know. And the third time is I once heard. The fourth time is mine, all right? So when you look up and see it on a video somewhere, you'll say, hey, I said that. But anyway, but it is about this, you all. And I'm convinced we can do this. I mean, I think Oakland is just so right for the moment. And I hope that all of you will lend your time, your talent, and your treasure to it.